Okay? So we'll look at some verses that I think are often misunderstood. And Matthew 16, verse 26, our first one. Now this verse, you've heard it before many times. For what profit is it to a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? Now, how many times, have you ever heard that preached evangelistically, an evangelistic message? Have you? Not in this church. Very good. Very good. But it's probably a standard of evangelists everywhere, you know. You can gain the whole world, but if you go to hell, what do you really profit? That's the common approach to it. But let's think through this A truth, B truth. Let's think through the context of what's being said here. If we back up, we find out that Jesus has just told his disciples in verses like 20 through 22 that he's going to Jerusalem and he's going to suffer many things and die. And this is where Peter says to him, "No, Lord, you're not going to do that." And Jesus says to him, "Get behind me, Satan." So now Jesus has just said that I'm going to die. And now he's saying, if you want to be my disciples, here's what you have to do. And verse 24 tells us, if we look at this context, who is he talking to? It says right there, his disciples, right? So he wouldn't be telling his disciples how to have eternal life, especially in fact of the fact that his commitment is taking him to his death. Now he's going to speak to his disciples about their commitment. And he begins, if they really want to be their disciples, he says, let them come after me as a term for discipleship, follow me. Let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. To go to Jerusalem, Jesus would deny his natural desires to live. He was taking up his cross, meaning that he was facing death for their sakes. And he says, if you want to be my disciples, you need to be willing to die as well. And follow me. I'm following God's will, you follow God's will. Those kinds of things are critical to discipleship. Not conditions for salvation. So whoever desires to lose his life, whoever desires to save his life will lose it, but whoever saves his life for my sake will find it. Now there you have the word save, and we have to ask, what is the meaning of it? What does it mean to lose your life? Is he talking about going to hell, as many people would interpret it? What does he mean about saving your life? In the New King James Version, that word is used, save, and it is the word soteria, from sozo. It is the word sozo. Save your life, is he talking about being eternally saved? Or is he talking about being delivered from something? And what about this word soul or life? When we read verse, here's an interesting thing. Now I'm talking from the New King James Version. So in verse 25, he uses the word soul. He uses the word life, losing and saving your life. But in verse 26, he talks about the soul. He uses the word soul. Your version may do it differently, but did you know that that's actually the same word? And I wish that the New King James Version had been consistent here and just translated the word soul as life, like it is in verse 25. There would be less confusion. Because when we talk about saving the soul, people automatically think about eternal salvation. And that's a phrase that you really ought to track through the scriptures on its own. And you'll find that saving the soul is not a term that's used of eternal salvation, but it's used of delivering our spiritual life from the consequences of sin, and it's a sanctification term. And so we look at this passage, and we say, if he's speaking to the disciples about commitments that they need to make to be more of a disciple, then he can't be talking about going to heaven and hell. So what does it mean then to find your life and to lose your life? If you lose your life, if you try to find your life, you'll lose it. If you try to lose your life, you'll save it. What he's talking about is the life as in its essence. What is life to us? You see the slogans or T-shirts, that says, football is life. golf is life. In other words, if I wore a shirt that said golf is life, that means that that's what I live for. That's the most important thing to me. And that's what defines me. I'm a golfer. And I kind of build my life around that. And what Jesus is saying, whatever your agenda is for life, or whatever it is that you have made the most important thing in your life, if you give that to God, you'll really save your life, because he gives life back to you, life abundant, John 10:10. The abundance of life. We think, oh man, I can't do without golf. God says, oh, just let me show you what you can do without. And then he gives us life back. You remember the story of Aaron Ralston? What was the movie made? Was it called 172? Where he went to Blue Man Canyon in Utah, went hiking, went down in a crevice, and the big 800-pound rock rolled on his arm. Is it 72 hours? 172. I don't forget, but Nick Franco coming back. So he's pinned down there, and for 3 days he cannot escape, and he takes his phone and he starts dictating goodbye messages to his family. And on the third day, he realizes that he has this cheap multi-tool that he carries with him, and with dull blades and everything. And he thinks that the only way I'm going to get out of here is to do what I have to do. If you've seen the movie, he starts to cut through his skin. It takes him a couple days to do that, though, and he finally gets down to the bone. And I think he waited till the next morning, the fourth morning, and then he torqued himself so strongly it just broke the bone. But he's not free yet, because what's inside the bone? Or next to the bone, you've got that nerve that runs down, the white nerve. And he knew that would be the hardest part, because you know when you touch the nerve, that's just tremendous pain. So I think it was until the fifth morning that he waited, got up enough courage to sever the nerve. He did that. He broke free. He passed out, I believe. And when he woke up, he was free. He tied a tourniquet around his arm. He was able to climb up. Long story short, German couple found him hiking out, and his life was saved. Here's what he says. He says, that day, I didn't lose my arm. I found my life. See, sometimes you have to give up what's near and dear to you in order to find the fullness of life. Someone's put it this way, and I really like it. When life ceases to be the issue, life becomes the reality. When life ceases to be the issue, life becomes the reality. So my friends, if you're holding on to something you don't think you can do without, try giving it to God and see if he doesn't give it back to you 100-fold. Now I'm preaching, so let's go on. You see how we can lose the precious and deep truth of Matthew chapter 16 if we just take it as a truth, heaven and hell passage? You see what I'm doing here? But if we take it as truth spoken to disciples, then we see, man, there's all kinds of implications for me here about how I live my life and how I can serve God. You see why it's so important to see these distinctions?